Welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast, and I hope everybody had a great week. Can I just say that this is a first for us in quite a while? We've been dealing with illness and other things going on, so this will actually be the first full movie review we've done in weeks. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know if you agree with our thought processes or if you think we're just talking shit. It's quite all right to say that. We won't take any offense to it. Um,
Mm,
well, maybe the movie Pope will, but just like the real Pope, he's got all that power. Um, but yeah, also remember to share this video with everybody that you know, help us grow the audience. And if there are any movies or TV shows you'd like us to do an in-depth review or just do a quick review of, let us know in the comments below. We are always looking for more suggestions. Lee, how are you doing this week?
good, good. Excited that um, we get to talk about something good, or at least, in my opinion, something positive. So I'm always happy to talk about something good as compared to maybe other things, especially in the Spider-Man universe that have been maybe a little bit on the bad end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I was gonna say like over the past few weeks we've actually seen a slew of movies come out that that have actually been been deemed pretty decent to watch. I know Dune Part 2 came out I think a few weeks ago, so that's something that
Yes.
that's on our to watch list. And we'll definitely do a review of that as soon as possible. And then and besides that, we also watched American Fiction, and we'll be doing a review of that pretty soon. Um, so today we're taking a look at Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Um, as everybody might know, this isn't actually the first installment. This is part two of the Spider-Man animated movies that they've done, and this was a really well done movie. And Lee, you actually suggested this quite a while ago too, because this
Yes.
flew under my radar for quite a bit. I kept thinking, there are too many like Marvel movies out there. I don't know if I have the strength to watch another one, but I gave it a go, and I mean, goddamn, like it's just phenomenal. Like as as an animator and as an artist, like the way that it was done, it was well executed from an artistic standpoint. Animation standpoint was phenomenal. Voice
Oh,
acting was spot
absolutely.
on, and the writing was just. I mean, I mean Kevin Feige. Like, please, I hope you have a bookshelf full of notebooks filled with notes because this is how you should be doing the multiverse saga.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I think that this stuck out, and I think I told you I made a very bold statement about it. I'm going to double down on that. I think that this was probably my favorite film of 2023. I use the term favorite as opposed to other terms, just
mhm.
because, like, I think you have the idea of what's the best, or like, what did you think was the best for a variety of reasons. This was definitely, I think, my favorite film of 2020.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too because because we have seen several Spider-Man movies over the past few years, and most of the Spider-Man movies that we've seen, I mean, there are some elements to them that we like, but then there are elements to which we'd say, well, if only they'd done it this way, or maybe if they tweaked it this way. I know. What was the last Spider-Man movie we saw? I think it was No Way Home. Was it?
Yeah, another one of those. I can't remember the name because there's a bunch of them. It's the one that obviously has
Yeah.
all the Spider-Man showing up in it, which I did enjoy. I think that's one that they hit. Actually, I want to say Sony. I don't remember if it's every 3 or 5 years they have to like redo Spider-Man, otherwise they lose the rights.
Mhm.
So that's why
Yeah, that's yeah,
you
that,
only
that
see it
that's
pop
right.
up
That's
quite
right.
frequently.
Because now that Marvel's kind of gotten into the whole Spider-Man thing, they're sort of moving away from focusing on Spider-Man like they used to back in the early 2000s and focusing on peripheral characters like like Venom, Madam Web, and Morbius. Those are like the big three that come to mind because they made movies about them within the
Mm.
past 10 years. So let's go ahead and dive into Across the Spider Verse. And can I also just add, we also we also saw Madam Web recently, so we'll kind of uh, web that into the conversation, pun intended. um, because I think this would be a good way to contrast how to make a really really good Spider-Man movie with how to really really fuck up a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, it's the other one's just not even. It's not even worth it.
Hey, hey,
As
hey,
far
hey,
as
you,
the
hey, you said watch Madam Web, so I was like, all right, I mean,
well,
I'll watch Madam
yeah,
Web.
I no, wait a minute. I said I was watching that on web. I didn't say anything like you have to watch it. I wanted to watch it because, like, obviously, it's just been talked to death about how poor it is, and then when I watched, I'm like, oh wow, this is like really bad. It is totally forgettable for everything. But yes, we could focus on a much better film than Across the Spider Verse, which I'm sure we'll accidentally say the wrong name of it at some stage, or at least I know I will. So,
All right, so let's
um,
go ahead and dive right in. So,
yeah,
Lee, take it away.
and you, I just want to call out, you're absolutely right. As far as just like the quality of just the art, like everything is just so visually appealing in this. I can't imagine how long it took to really create all this stuff. It is just truly breathtaking. So, I get that for animated films, they don't have, I think, kind of the same audience as everybody else. And I would say if you're somebody that's really not into animated stuff, I would really try to give this stuff an honest go because I feel like the medium really is good for especially superhero stuff. It's really good for that. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to be able to check out and enjoy this stuff. So we start off here, in the second of at least three, right? So we know that, I guess spoiler alert, this is clearly not gonna have a conclusion. They very much say like pretty much like, hey, cool, he'll return in the next one. So we kind of start off, and I find it interesting that this really starts off with Gwen, which I was very interested by, right? So we follow Miles Morales, and he's obviously the main character, but we actually get a lot of Gwen, and we start to really kind of see Gwen's backstory and understand more about it. Like we got a little hint of it in the first one, but this we really get to see it. So we kind of have, in Gwen's universe, right? And I guess we're gonna have to start using that type of terminology because there's a lot of universal stuff that's happening here. So you kind of have, Gwen's universe, and we see Peter Parker, and I kind of noticed Peter Parker kind of plays very close to Dr. Connors and how he's depicted in her universe, where he kind of morphs into a lizard, with him just trying out and doing what he needs to with genetics. Gwen ends up killing Peter, not realizing that, this monster that attacks this dance, she doesn't realize that it's Peter at the time, but, she ends up killing him. Not really her directly doing it, but it's kind of left a little bit vague as far as how that goes. But she ends up killing him, and really this kind of starts this rift with her father. And I think that this is kind of something that we'll see a lot of. We'll see a lot of parallels between kind of Gwen's story with her father as is Miles with his father, because I think they play off each other very well. Gwen kind of ends up having kind of this really poor relationship with the father. The father looks at Spider Girl, Spider Woman, whatever you want to call her. He looks at her as the killer of Peter Parker, and obviously he's searching for his own daughter, trying to figure that out. And we kind of see the whole multiverse thing happen when we have this fight with the Vulture. And I like how the art design of the Vulture is so different. And it kind of creates this whole idea of like, something's out of place when you see the Vulture. So even before there's going to be like a lot of this universe hopping type of stuff, you already kind of get that vibe from seeing the Vulture. So we had the Vulture come in, and this is where we kind of start to meet characters of the Spider Society, which is going to be a huge part of what we look at. And you got Miguel O'Hara, who I guess I would kind of coin as the leader. And we get to meet a character called Jess, which is just, I mean, talk about a badass opening. You just got uh, a Spider Woman coming out on a motorcycle and kicking ass. I mean, it is absolutely such a cool thing to see, and obviously something that you could never. Worst timing for that to go off. So obviously something that you probably wouldn't see in a non-animated film, but really looks cool in an animated fashion. Um, and you kind of have this battle with Vulture. Gwen obviously, decides that for her to kind of live in that universe is a little bit too challenging. Her whole relationship with her father is pretty much in shambles. So she ends up kind of going to this spider society in order to kind of live. There's a way to kind of not deal with her challenges. Um, and I just found the whole opening to be very interesting because we never actually see Miles for the first 20 minutes of it. And I think that's a very interesting choice by kind of the director and what they wanted to do with it, that they kind of hold off on seeing the title character for so long. So how did you feel about the whole Gwen sequence for you? What kind of stuck out to you as far as everything that we kind of got to know and understand more about the character?
Well, I kind of like the fact that with that opening, we kind of get to see more of the Spider-Man universe. We get to see more of different iterations of these Spider characters rather than just focus on Miles Morales. Because I think where a lot of these movies kind of fall flat, is where they focus on the character too much. You kind of get exhausted.
Yes.
And if you build
Yes.
if you build this multiverse, you kind of have to think to yourself, well, we have a lot of these characters. Why are we focusing on just this one person? Or I guess I should say this one iteration of the character, because as much as I like Miles Morales, and as much as I think, he's a very interesting character who has a lot of potential. It is pretty nice to see, like, what's life like on the other side, or on the other side of the tracks, as they would say. Um, and then, and like you said, I mean, when we get to see Miguel O'Hara and we see a different iteration of how this Spider-Man interacts with others, I just think, this is not your neighborhood friendly Spider-Man. This is someone who's like very dark, very driven. He's almost kind of like a Batman character in a way.
Yeah.
Like,
And
did you get that
even the
vibe from him?
music. Yeah, absolutely. Even like the music, like it is just very, you get this very strong sense of foreboding. Like it's not a very playful sound as he kind of enters the foray. So I really like how they're able to kind of use that kind of music to help kind of create, or this, I guess, music, but sound. You're trying to create this type of understanding of the character, and you kind of get that just from how he kind of gets introduced to it. So absolutely, I think it's very cool how you do it. And yeah, like you pointed out, it is very cool to see how they're able to do more with these characters than just focusing on a singular character.
Because I
So,
mean, like in popular
um,
culture, when you think of Spider-Man, who immediately comes to mind? Peter Parker,
Peter
right?
Parker. Yeah.
So, so even when they did decide, what, we are going to do a Spider-Man movie, but it's not going to be Peter Parker. It's going to be Miles Morales. I mean, it's on the one hand, it is nice to kind of focus on different iterations of Spider-Man, because there have been, numerous stories written over the past probably 50 or 60 years about this character. Um, and quite honestly, like, after 50 or 60 years, you would get a little bit tired of hearing about, another Peter Parker
Absolutely.
story.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
not to mention too, I mean, when you call it Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, or Spider-Man, just to make it simple, I mean, you're technically not lying, because yeah, it is a Spider-Man movie. It's just not the Spider-Man you're used to thinking of, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, so we after kind of seeing everything with Gwen, we do eventually kind of get Miles, and I like how it's kind of this playful opening, and I find it very interesting how they do it. So we meet our actual villain, Spot, who ironically was like a scientist in the first one that gets hit by the bagel. I believe it was a bagel.
Mhm.
I guess someone could correct me if I'm wrong. But he gets hit in the bagel in the first one. He ends up being the scientist that, through some experiments he was doing, he became this character Spot. And it's I love what they kind of do with this because Spock to me is kind of like that like opening villain that you sometimes see in superheroes where they just kind of deal with them just to kind of get the plot or the story started. But Spot is actually a lot more than that. And I love what they did with that. I thought it was such a cool idea that this seemingly innocuous villain ends up being the true villain of the whole story. Well, at least one of them, right? I think there's a lot
Yeah,
of things that
yeah,
you could say.
and they kind of joke about it too because Miles is like, oh,
Yes.
you're just the villain of the week, and he's like, oh, I'm not just a villain of the week. I'm going to show it to you. So in sort of a weird way. I mean, yeah, I mean, the Spot says, you created me through this accident. But you could also say that Miles keeps creating him as the villain because
Yeah.
if he wasn't being so witty and kept calling him names like you're the villain of the week, you kind of have to ask yourself, would he have gone as far as he did?
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yep.
Because
Yeah.
because like when I was watching the movie, I kind of thought, the fact that Miles keeps egging him on and keeps pissing him off and calling him the villain of the week, it kind of makes him want to prove that, hey, I'm more than just this guy who creates holes and I can kick my own ass. Which was a very funny sequence, by the way, with the ATM. I really like that one.
Yes.
But but I mean, like the fact that he lets Miles's words kind of get to him, and that kind of Miles inadvertently kind of like eggs him on and turns him into this sort of existential threat that he becomes near the end of the movie. It's like, can we sort of say that Miles is truly responsible, whether directly or indirectly? Because the Spot does say that he is responsible, indirectly for what happened to him, but in some of these supervillain origin stories, it's like the hero inadvertently leads to the creation of the villain, and that's it. I
Mhm.
feel like in this case, what Miles is doing is that he's continuously creating and recreating him or forcing him to kind of you know continue on this path to where he wants to prove that he's not just some villain. He is the villain, um as it were.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you that there is certainly a role that Miles plays in, and not only directly but indirectly as well.
And it's a continuous
And
process too. It's not like it's
yeah,
not like something that's one and done. It's like this is something that he feels like he has to do. That's why he keeps going to all these different Alchemex facilities throughout the multiverse.
yes, 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 and that's something that ends up happening because we see Gwen. She shows up in Miles' world, and she's trying to help track Spot because obviously he's able to. We find out through some of the actions that he's able to kind of go into different universes. And I like how this is kind of where they very subtly start adding these seeds of doubt into Miles' head, which I think really is what creates such a strong conclusion because we know that Gwen's there and she kind of plays it off as like, oh, yeah, well, I'm here and everything like that. But we know she's there more for business. And that's not to say that she doesn't want to see Miles, but that's not really her overall intent. And I like how it very subtly adds this idea of distrust when we get to meet Gwen. And as that seed of trust is planted, we start to see it kind of pile up more and more. So Gwen kind of is there. We kind of get this nice, I think very cutesy, I will say, interaction between Gwen and Miles, which I really liked. And I thought that the sequence where they're kind of inverted at kind of the clock tower, whatever's there. I forget what they're at, right? They're at some type of big monument. And I love the part where they're kind of like inverted and they're kind of like sitting there and, it's clear that Miles is trying to, make a pass at Gwen, and Gwen's kind of like subtly hits it, like, anytime Gwen is with Spider-Man, it always ends bad. And that really starts to play in this idea of, are you it's a fate idea. And this comes up in such a big way because it's like, you're saying that this always happens in every multiverse. My whole thing is like, there's a lot of multiverses out there. Are you sure that this always is what's happening, or is it just a common trend? And that plays such a huge fact into the end of the story as well. But I really like that. I love the way that they kind of play on this idea that Gwen's and Spider-Man's, they just always had this falling out, and it kind of makes Miles think twice about kind of his feelings, and during this whole sequence, Spot ends up getting the materials he needs to become stronger, and this is how we get this really, really cool transition where we move out of Miles' universe, and we go into, I guess I would say, like a universe based upon like a place in India, right? Would you say that's kind of, I don't remember if they have like a name for it, but it pretty much was like I got a very obvious Indian vibe from it.
Yeah, it's like it's like if Manhattan turned into Mumbai. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, there. I like that. I like that. So yeah, and this is kind of where, we kind of see a lot of this type of, I think we start to meet more and more of our Spider Society characters. So we kind of meet this, kind of Indian version of Spider-Man. And, once again, right, like, even though, he's, a different ethnicity, he kind of follows in that same idea of Spider-Man, right? It just gives us a different type of flavor for him.
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
have
because
kind of,
they still have that that nature that you would recognize in Spider-Man, but it's just in a different package.
yes, exactly, right. And then, he has kind of that same thing. Like, I think about the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, right? So he falls in love with Gwen. Gwen in that version, father is a police chief. This is pretty much the same thing. Like, in this version of it, that Spider-Man, he has, a romantic interest in, kind of the police officer's daughter.
Mhm.
And it very much shares that similar vibe. So you kind of get this introduction of another Spider-Man character, and kind of like the three of them are, tracking after Spot. Spot ends up actually winning in this circumstance where he gets to the lab, and pretty much gets this huge power surge. And you have all these Spider-Man characters that are trying to help save what they can, as this laboratory is pretty much being destroyed, and kind of the environment around it is going through that.
Yeah, because
And
because that's when the multiverse, like, isn't that when when Indian Spider-Man's universe starts to collapse?
yes, yes. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
because I think some of it happens just from the destruction of the building. But yes,
Yeah.
there is kind of a part of it too where they talk about canon events, and that kind of is what's creating this. And it's just, I love the sequence because it's so imaginative as to going out there, and you have Miles that ends up saving the police officer's daughter, um, and in doing so, also saves the father. And this is the police officer that was supposed to die. And I'm using air quotes, which I know no one could see, but he's supposed to die here because it's almost like his character is fated to die in this instance, but because of Miles' interactions with him, he ends up surviving.
Yeah, because
Um,
because
and
that's the common thread in across the
yes,
multiverse for every Spider-Man. It's kind of like it's kind of
every
like it's kind of like when we saw the Flash. Technically, Barry's mother was supposed to die because that's what kickstarts the chain of events, and just by Barry changing that one thing, it kind of throws everything into the pile of shit that that you end up seeing. By the way, check out our review of the Flash. It is pretty interesting. But
yes, yeah.
but go ahead,
Not the
continue.
movie, but the review.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess the movie has some things, but
I mean,
yeah, like
if you got nothing to do on the weekend, then you might as well just waste 2 hours. But just watch the
yeah,
review. We pretty much distill everything.
yes,
And that.
yeah. So, but yeah, so we have Miles. He ends up saving the day, and he gets brought to the Spider Society, and this part is just so much fun. Just the amount of spider characters and variants that they bring into this is just is truly awesome to see. I would say even if you're not super interested in seeing the movie, just seeing all the characters that they bring into this must have been such a huge monumental task. I can't imagine how long it took for all these animators and creators to come together, come up with an idea for how to create the Spider Society. Because, like I said, I mean, there's hundreds of very distinct variants that we see, including, one of my favorites, which was a T-Rex Spider-Man, uh, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
No,
Yeah,
I personally liked Holby. Holby was my favorite.
yes. There's a bunch
Yeah,
of
the
like
punk rocker.
yes. Oh
because
yeah, he's
he's using
absolutely
his guitar on that.
yes, yeah, he's totally badass. Really liked his character. So, but yes, there's tons of characters, and I think this is where the whole story really starts to kick in all gears. So you have, Miles there. We get to meet the Peter Parker that he interacted with in the first one. Really like the fact that, he has a little daughter now, which I thought was super cute. They play off each other very well. So, obviously nice to see. And I just like all the story that happens, in this Spider Society, because really what ends up happening is we have this idea that, or we see this trope a lot in superheroes movies where like somebody has someone close to them that dies. Now, the big question that's posed by the movie by the end is, does that really define who you are? And I just really like that type of idea. Like, do you have to be defined by your past in order to say that you're going to be that character, right? We see a lot of times in Spider-Man, Ben Parker, he's just a walking corpse, right? Like, I mean, let's be real here. Ben is always going to die in some form, right? So we see that, right? And then you see, like, in other superheroes, right? We see the same thing, right? Batman. I mean, how many times do we see uh, his parents get killed, right? It's almost ingrained into you. The origins of his character start with his parents dying. Like, I think most people know that, even if you're not big into Batman, you know about that happening. So I really liked what they did with that, and the fact that it's almost built up in the society that all the characters accept that you have to let these people die. And that to me was so powerful to see, right? You have all these characters, even people that you're the closest to, right? That Miles is closest to, right? Peter Parker, Gwen. Like, Miles is sitting there pleading his case that, what, we don't have to watch these people die, but all of them look away from him. And I'm just like, wow, what a strong scene to see that all these characters have kind of sat there and they've decided, like, hey, you know what? In order for us to save all these people, we have to allow this person closest us to die. So I wanted to get your take on that, because I think this is really the penultimate part of the movie for me, is this sequence. So I wanted to get your take on this part as well.
Well, let's start off the fact that Miguel reveals that the spider that bit Miles technically wasn't supposed to happen to him at all, right?
That's very true. Yep.
That came as a shock to me, because I was like, because I naturally assumed, oh well, in this universe, a different person gets bitten by by the spider and has the powers of Spider-Man, becomes that universe's Spider-Man. No big deal. But but when Miguel goes into that whole tirade about how Miles is the anomaly who's causing all of this mess, it kind of creates this a bit of self-doubt in Miles, because then he starts to wonder, well, well, who am I really if I'm not supposed to be Spider-Man? But I think and this is just me conjecturing here. It's this idea that regardless of how things are supposed to be, the fact that Miles does what he does makes him Spider-Man. So so even if he's not supposed, even if he wasn't supposed to be the Spider-Man of his universe, like he is Spider-Man. So whether they like it or not, it's not like the Spider Society can just go back and undo or redo this whole thing because of what's happened, right? Um, so obviously Miles has no control over what happened in the past, and neither does the Spider Society. But I think but I think it would be wrong on them to just assume that, that Miles, shouldn't count or shouldn't be included, in this spider family because, he's an anomaly. I mean, he's still one of them. He has all the traits and, powers of a Spider-Man, and he's doing the work of a Spider-Man in that, in his universe. So he's doing good, a good job. So I just think it's a bit odd that they put so much emphasis on the fact that we're driven by destiny. Like we have to have
Yes.
things, we have to have, A before B because that's how you get C, right? Because if
Yeah,
because if you take
absolutely.
because if you take B out, then C goes away and then everything just falls apart.
Yep. Yeah, and that to me is what really stuck out to me is like these really the Spider Society I think has gotten ingrained in them this idea that you're a culmination of everything that happens, and that's the only a culmination of your past is ultimately what dictates everything of your future. Everything, right? It's fated for you to have these things happen because in order for you to be Spider-Man or whatever variant of it you want to be, you have to have this incident happen. And like, they pretty much show like, Uncle Ben, Aunt May, it's always something there that sparks this outcome, and really it shouldn't be the case of that. And I love how they kind of handle that. So pretty much the Spider Society is pretty much telling Miles like, hey, you have to let your dad die. um and that is just like something that it made my jaw drop. It really did. It was just so like powerful to see like all these characters, people that are your friends, they're pretty much all in agreement that, hey, sorry, you gotta let your dad die. And like I said, I think Miles has a very realistic reaction to that. Like, what are you guys crazy? You can't honestly expect me to believe that you're going to make me watch my dad get killed because for some reason my dad's death is something that has to happen in order for me to be a successful Spider-Man. And it
Yeah,
just
and that's
blew my mind.
yeah, and that's what I find so jarring is the fact that is that the death of his dad is supposed to make him better, so he wasn't good before then. Is that
Yes.
is that how am I supposed to
Yeah.
understand? Because so if his dad dies, that makes him an even better Spider-Man. So it's not like before where he was just doing all these things before. I mean, I like to think that Miles was doing a pretty decent job as Spider-Man. It's
Yeah.
not like it's
Yeah.
not like anything was. It's not like he missed a step or skipped a beat, before, or if his dad dies, it just makes him even more of a better superhero. But I did want to um go back a little bit because the movie starts off with us focusing on the Spot as the villain, and it was a very subtle shift, and I don't know if you caught this, but did you kind of get the feeling that the focus of the villainy was slowly kind of shifting away from the Spot to the Spider Society itself? Because I kind of got that
Yes.
feeling, you know.
Yes. Yes. I think well, I think
I mean,
there's
I mean,
hints
the
to
chase
it.
was kind of obvious if you think about it. That should have been
Yes.
a
Like,
giveaway right there.
yeah, I think it definitely becomes extremely obvious when we get to the actual Spider-Man society as a whole. Because before, like you do kind of get some of that vibe, and obviously, I think Miguel O'Hara is kind of depicted as kind of this hard to understand character, right? He's somebody that, I mean, through his, I mean, he very much has this upbringing, right? Like for Miguel, his backstory is he pretty much went into a different universe where he was already dead to kind of pick up the pieces, have his own family and everything. And, his decisions pretty much cause everything around him to crumble. And it makes sense for Miguel O'Hara to be the way he is, and that's what I really like about this story. You can't really say that Miguel O'Hara, like I know from an audience perspective, we feel like Miguel is kind of another villain, so to speak, but he's villain because of his own experience, and I think it's kind of one of those things where Miguel, he doesn't look at himself as the villain, right? He's looking at it as like I'm having to make the hard choice because what I'm doing is for the betterment of everyone.
Right,
And I think
right,
that
but that
makes that
reduces him to
such a
seeing
cool villain.
Right, but that reduces him to seeing everything in black and white. So it either has to be this or has to be
Yes,
that. So I think,
exactly,
so I
right?
think, yeah. So I think in that, in that respect, I mean, yeah, he's not, he's not a true villain like the Spot, because the Spot, is doing these things for selfish reasons. I mean, Miguel's motivations, they're, as difficult as they can be for us to, us to grasp. At the same time, there is a logic to it, and and you can sort of sympathize with him, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely, right. He's doing it for the quote unquote greater good that we always hear, and it's easily how that could be totally turned on its head by just having these instances that cause him to be who he is.
I mean,
Um,
another thing I want to mention too is the fact that is the fact that Miguel, obviously he's pretty much behaving in the same way as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, or at least what was it? There was an episode of What If where Strange, is trying to change his future, but he realizes that that if he does this, it will cause his universe to collapse. So you could sort of see the same thing happening with Miguel, because he did mention, like, he did go into that universe and it did live out that life that the dead Miguel couldn't live, and then his universe ends up getting wiped out anyway. So
yep.
it was pretty much a vain effort. So there's a bit of a tragic element to it, because as much as Miguel wants to make sure this doesn't happen, right? At the same time, I kind of feel like he's kind of lashing out, because yeah, I mean, he's upset that all this happened, but you kind of get the feeling that he's still angry at himself for having let this happen at
Oh, of
all,
course.
right?
Yes.
But I mean,
There's a lot of baggage there for sure.
but obviously he's projecting, because because as much as he's upset with himself, he's kind of making it seem like, well, I'm just gonna, like, put all my anger at Miles, and just make him. I could be Because I kind of got the feeling like he was just projecting too much on Miles, just almost making it feel like Miles was kind of responsible for causing just about every bad thing,
Yes.
which may or may not be the sense that you or the viewers may have. But to me, like, I kind of got that feeling. I'm like, that's a lot to project on a kid who you barely know, and who probably had no interaction with you up until this point. But
Yeah, yeah, because we know that the spider that bites Miles comes from Miguel's original universe. So yeah, absolutely. Like there is a ton of baggage that goes with Miguel and
wait,
Miles.
hold on. I could have sworn it came from Gwen's universe, didn't it?
No, was it the spider was Universe 42? That's why
Okay.
when Miles is transported in at the end of it, he goes to Miles's universe.
Or a different
Or wait a minute,
universe.
no, you're right. It is Gwen, isn't it?
Yeah, because that's the reason why the Peter in her universe became the lizard, right? It's because he didn't get the
Okay, we're
spider
gonna edit that
ability.
part so I sound like less of a retard. Um, and for me not to say it like that because I regretted it as soon as I said it. So please make sure you edit that. All right, break. Okay. Yes, the spider, right, transforms into Gwen's universe. Crap. Now I lost my train of thought.
We were talking about the spider that was that came from a different universe, bit Miles instead.
Yes. Yeah, though guess that doesn't really make sense now. So because initially that was kind of where I was going with it, but now I have to backtrack on that. So but I guess kind of moving forward to like I think kind of the next part in this sequence of the movie, right? We got kind of this chase sequence, right? Where we got Spider-Man, we have um Miles, I should say Miles, not Spider-Man. That's not very helpful in this. So we have Miles.
Although there was a funny sequence, they're like, get Spider-Man, everyone's looking at each other like, what?
Yes, everyone does the meme that we all know, where Spider-Man's all pointing at each other.
Yeah.
So yes, we do get that, and they definitely did not miss an opportunity, just like in the live action one. They're at the most recent live action one where they did the little meme where they pointed at each other. So yes, they do that here too. So we see Miles, and he eventually escapes, and he escapes into Gwen's universe, not to be confused with any other universes. Um, so yes, so that's what we end up seeing, and I like how we have Miles escaping, and then Gwen starts to really step up and kind of stand up for, like, are we sure we're doing the right things? Like, are we not the bad guys now? And I really like how she just bluntly puts it like that. Like, I think people really have to start questioning that. And it seems like so many people have just accepted that's the reality, that they're not willing to look outside that box and understand that, it really, I think we had this all wrong. And I love how Gwen gets sent back to her own universe, and it almost proves her point, right? It proves her point that by her going back, right, Gwen, kind of reconciles with her father, and she finds out that her father is no longer a police officer, right? So the whole idea that Gwen's father was always destined to be killed because he's a police officer, he's going to get killed kind of in the line of duty. That's always kind of what we see play out in these other instances of it. Well, now that he's not a police officer, he can't die in the duty. So now it just proves our point that Gwen's being able to see this. She understands now that she is in the right. All these characters have been sitting there doubting that hey, I gotta let this person close to me die because that's what's going to create who I am, and that's a part of my character. It needs to happen. But for her, she's a perfectly successful, just like Miles, right? They're successful at what they do as being a spider person, and this just validates that there is no destiny for that. They don't have to watch them be killed. And I just love being able to see that because it helps justify what we're looking for. So what do you think about, like, kind of Gwen's, I think, fall story and how that happened?
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's nice because it's sort of it sort of shows that that the future, quote unquote, isn't set in stone, because
Yes.
you would kind of get the impression from Miguel that everything is, this is like a nexus point, to use multiverse speak. This is an event that has to happen and it cannot be changed, right? Like, this certain person in this certain position has to die on the certain date in order for in order for this universe to continue. But obviously, you know, George Stacy, resigning from the police force, no longer being a police officer, that would negate, what is supposed to transpire. And we don't see, and obviously we don't see any indications that this is, that her universe is collapsing anytime soon. Which then
Yeah.
raises another question. So does that mean that was supposed to happen and then someone else was supposed to die, or
Yep.
what? Because then because then Gwen could sort of call into question, well, what was the point of all of that to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. There's just.
because then it calls into question, well, you know if the Spider Society says X is supposed to happen, but if X is no longer in that position, then can that really happen to X? Because as we saw in the Indian Spider Verse, you know just by saving that police chief, the multiverse starts to collapse, right? Because
Mhm.
because it sort of shows that you know just by this just by this element, this is what's supposed to occur, and if it doesn't occur, then yeah, you're boned. But but let's say, for instance, if the police chief, he wasn't a police chief, he just happened to be like a different someone else, like a medic, for instance. um
Mhm.
and he gets killed, but he's not a police chief. Would that still follow the rules, or would that still cause the multiverse to collapse in on itself, or the universe to collapse in on itself? So it kind of so for me, it kind of raises a lot of questions as to whether what really are the rules, like who determines them, and how do we know what really goes on? Because it's one of those questions that that came up when I was watching Loki seasons 1 and 2. It's like we have this organization that watches and monitors over the multiverse, right? And they've been around for a long time, so they know what's going on. So you would think that they would know what the rules are, but but when you look deep down, they're pretty much they're pretty much making up as they go along as the rest of us. So they're no more better informed than you or me, really.
Yeah, I think it really shows like people kind of follow others, and I don't want this to be kind of like getting into that type of territory, but like a lot of people just accept what it is. So, you see a guy like Miguel, right? He thinks that, hey, you know what? This is what happened when I tried to step into this other universe. I caused this whole universe to crash. And I think because he just speaks so fervently about everything that happened, that so many people just kind of latch on to like, okay, cool. This guy is saying that this is what's going to happen if we don't do this thing. And then all of a sudden, you get all these people that are kind of getting into the same idea, but then there's not enough people that are really asking, like, okay, is this truly okay? Like, is this truly what's happening?
Yeah, where's the
I
data to
think,
back
like,
it up, basically?
yeah, right. Like you see the TVA, like, what got them to the point that they're thinking like this? Or is it all just something like you have like you got someone at the top pulling the strings and everyone else is just kind of going along with it because it's like, okay, well, I see justification for it, but I can't really be certain. And I like the fact that we start to get those questions happening. So then you got like Gwen, that's like, okay, I know now I have this strong purpose that, you know what, my thinking or my logic is wrong. I need to rectify this. So Gwen, takes like one of the little devices, right? And she goes into Miles's universe, right? The one that we're expecting. And I like how you kind of have these kind of like things happening simultaneously where Miles is at, his place talking with his mom. He thinks everything is fine. Gwen is slowly going there to Miles's place, and you're getting to this point where everything should converge, and then you realize that Gwen and Miles are not in the same universe. And I really thought that was super cool because you see Gwen confronting the parents, like the actual Miles parents, and the whole time we're thinking that's going to happen, but actually Miles is in a different universe, and you find out that Miles's father was killed, right? In this other universe, right? Miles's father was killed. The uncle is still alive, the uncle from the first one. And you kind of see we have kind of an evil Miles now in this universe. So just a whole lot of interesting things going on. And obviously, it totally ends on a cliffhanger. And that to me, I was not expecting that at all. Because like I was looking at the time, I'm like, my gosh, what are they going to do here to wrap this up? Like I felt like they had to do something really quick. And it was just like, we'll continue in the third one. So I had no idea about that going into this. So to me, that was about the only thing that really bothered me with it. Was a bummer to me that we weren't able to see the full story.
But I mean, it does end on a cliffhanger that leaves you wanting more.
Yes.
So that's
yeah,
kind of a good
course,
thing.
yes. Yeah.
I mean, because if you think about it, and I don't want to, and I don't mean to, belabor the point, but the fact is that when Miles goes to that universe and he sees that George is dead and there's no Spider-Man, it kind of it kind of refutes the point that Miguel was making, right? It's like it's like really, you were supposed to say this happened, so it happened, right? But look what happened. Things didn't get any better.
Exactly.
It just got a whole lot worse.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, the worst that can happen is you fall into a pool of water surrounded by Peruvian spider people, and then all of a sudden time just keeps rewinding until you get things right.
Yep. Great segue for Madam Web. So,
I guess I could sort of like break this off into like a separate review, but I guess we'll integrate it because it's just.
Oh no, I don't even want to talk. I'd rather just talk totally separate about Madam Web because we'd just be here this would be like a 2-hour long episode if we're gonna talk about Madam Web.
I mean, it's kind of getting that way anyway. But so Lee, what's your overall score for Across the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, so Across the Spider-Verse, I mean, I absolutely enjoyed this movie. I think it just blends things so well. And, I like how it's something where not only if we just take out all the crazy great art and the musical scores and everything like that, if we're just looking at the characters, the story, the humor, it just does it so well. I think back to, kind of when Marvel was at its peak, it could kind of do these things really well. But I think a lot of people kind of got tired of like kind of the Marvel humor, like it always kind of felt out of place. For this, it knows when to be serious and it knows when to be funny, and I really like how it could do that really well. And I think it just pulls it off so well. I think if I gave this a grade, I would say this is about a 4.6 out of 5. Spider webs, I think that this was just fantastic. I think easily, was definitely my favorite movie of the year. And like I said, there's definitely a lot of strong contenders for that. But I think this was my favorite, and I just give kudos to everyone that worked on this. And I'm super looking forward to the third movie.
Yeah, so so I see your 4.6. I'm going to say 4.8 out of 5 spider webs. And I'll say this: I love the fact that that they're able to incorporate so many different spider people, but each one has a distinctive personality, and it works really. It kind of shows that you can write the same character but give them different attributes and different traits. Like I said, Holby was definitely my favorite because you still recognize him as a Spider-Man, but he's got this like sort of punk rock, I don't give a fuck attitude.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Indian Spider-Man who who's very much this like very jovial kind of guy who's just like who's just like very talkative, and he's very he's very much rooted in in Indian culture, but you still, like I said before, you still recognize him as Spider-Man. I love I love the fact that you kind of get to see more of Gwen Stacy, because because really Gwen Stacy has been done a terrible disservice in many previous iterations of Spider-Man, whether it was the Tobey Maguire one or the one with Andrew Garfield. So it is nice to see a fresh take on Gwen and see her actually play a more proactive role in the Spider-Verse than simply just being the damsel in distress.
Absolutely.
I just want to give a shout out to Oscar Isaac. I mean, he knocked it out of the park playing Miguel O'Hara. Like the gravitas,
absolutely.
The gravitas he brought to that role is just phenomenal. And then Haley Steinfeld. I mean, she could be she could be a voice actress for the rest of her career, and I would watch everything that she's done because she's just phenomenal as a voice actress. Not to mention too Jason Schwartzman. The guy we usually associate with Wes Anderson movies. I mean, he does a pretty good job as the Spot. Now, I will say this: my main gripe is is the fact that you start off focusing on the Spot and then he kind of just disappears. Right? He kind of falls into a hole. If we're gonna be that clever, but so I kind of wish that we kind of got to see more of what he was doing, but but for what they were doing with trying to like show what the multiverse was like and what the Spider Society's like, I really won't fault them too much, but I kind of feel like maybe if the Spider-Verse kind of like put more focus on trying to find the Spot or trying to have the Spot more in like the Spider-Verse's like scope, and then Miles kind of be like, oh well, we just discovered another anomaly, so now we got two things we gotta go after. Because you kind of get the feeling like midway everybody's kind of forgotten the Spot or who he was, and I don't know if that was like intentional or what, but it's like everybody just forgot. Oh, there's a villain we're supposed to track down. It's the Spot, but no, here's Miles Morales. Apparently he's a bigger threat, so now we got to go after him. So
let me ask you this: would have been better, right? So what if in this iteration we still had like talks about the Spider Society, we still see a little bit about it, but what happens if it ended with Miles being the Spider Society, being told that where he's like kind of put in that cage, and that's where it ends. So this way it ends kind of in the Spider Society, so you have more focus on Spot, and it just kind of ends with the Spider Society cliffhanger where you find out that the Spider Society, we've been looking forward to seeing them, and you find out that maybe they're not the right fit. Do you think it would be better if it was like that?
Yeah, I think if they ended it right there, it would have been a much more potent cliffhanger, because because Miles going to that universe where his dad is dead and there's no Spider-Man, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like, okay, that's good, but it's not as punchy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It doesn't have as much gravitas because there's a bit of a resolution there. You kind of know what happened because we know that George is dead, as opposed to if you just left him in that little bubble or that little cage. There's a bit of did will he or won't he kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. I think it had that little bit extra there, and I think it's like 2.5 hours. Like it's a little bit longer, so maybe like just
that would have been a great way to shave time off. So
yes, yeah, I think maybe there's something that they could do there. But like I said, absolutely, I think you can nitpick anything, and certainly I would agree with you. It definitely feels like they're trying to jam a lot in there, and I think that does take away from some of the screen time of some characters.
all right. Well, so go ahead and let us know in the comments below. Let us know if if we're right or if you agree with our talking points or if you think we're talking shit. And if there are any movies or TV shows you'd definitely like us to check out, let us know in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next review. Take it easy.